Welcome to Young Money with Tracy Bissett, the advice show for young millionaires in the making. It's time for some $1 Million Straight Talk with Tracy, President and Chief Financial Fitness Trainer at Bissett Financial Fitness. Each week, Tracy's going to tell you what you need to know now at the beginning of your earning curve. Basic and advanced financial concepts made clear, healthy money habits and the missteps to avoid, and all the stuff that you can do to set yourself up for a future of fantastic financial freedom. Ready to lace up and start this week's financial fitness training? Let's do it, Tracy.
Welcome to the Young Money Podcast. Suzanne Tyson has been involved in various capacities with higher education and student funding for more than half of her 30-year career, holding roles in sales, marketing, and editorial at several publishing companies. From 2008 to 2012, she ran scholarship matching company StudentAwards.com. In 2013, Suzanne combined all of her previous career experience to conceive, develop, and launch HigherEdPoints.com, the only company in the world to enable the conversion of loyalty points into funds for higher education. Her efforts with HigherEdPoints have directly assisted students and parents funding of over $1 million in tuition payments and student loan repayments. Welcome to the show, Suzanne.
Thank you, Tracy. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great. I'm so glad that you could be here with us today. It'd be wonderful if you can start us off by telling us a little bit more about HigherEdPoints.com.
Sure. So HigherEdPoints, as you mentioned, is the first company to enable students to use anybody's loyalty points to help them pay for their tuition while they're in school and also to repay their student loans once they graduate. We have the Ontario and Alberta student loan programs, the provincial portion, in the program at over 125 universities and colleges, and even some high school programs like SHAD and Blythe, the summer program, and MEI. And people are finding that they're now adding HigherEdPoints to their funding list of funding sources for higher education, which is wonderful to hear. We have people who've come back for a few terms now to help pay off their school tuition.
Oh, that's fantastic. And what prompted you to start this particular business?
Well, I think it was all of the different career experiences that I had led me to conceiving of the idea, because I had been on campus and understood how the various administrative departments on university and college campuses works. That helped. And then I worked in the loyalty industry, and while I was working there, I thought, wouldn't it be great if people could actually use the points they collected to help them pay for their education? And then when I was at the scholarship matching company, there were always students that couldn't qualify for the government financial loans because their parents made too much money, but they also didn't have the 90-95% averages to help them get the merit-based awards. And so there were about 60% of students, and I call them the middle 60, that have to cobble together extra funds because they can't access the merit-based scholarships and the government funding. And it seemed to me that because there are billions and billions of loyalty points sitting in people's wallets being unused, that's a type of currency, if we could figure out how to tap into it, that could help a lot of people pay off some of the loan and even provide access. There are students who've used the program to take courses that they wouldn't otherwise be able to afford. So just hearing lots of stories from students that were looking for other sources of funding, it one thing led to another when I mentioned this idea to people, and we were able to launch in late 2013 with Aeroplan, who is our founding loyalty partner, and two schools. We had the University of New Brunswick and Centennial College on board when we launched, and then over the course of the next few years we were able to get over 125 institutions. So pretty much any school in Canada that a student or parent or donor would want to use the program to fund some tuition, we can get the funds into the actual student account. That's the other thing, is we actually send the money directly into the student's account at the school or into their loan account.
Oh, that's great. So there's no risk of them going off with the funds and using it for any other purpose.
No, and often what happens is students budget for the big expenses like tuition, and if they're in residence, that, and for meal plans. But what happens is it's the little fees. So if they don't have a bus pass, or they haven't calculated enough to cover the cost of food, or if they have a medical problem like a dental issue that's not covered by their student insurance plan, those are the things that they often find hard to fund. So if we can help students offset, $250, and we've even had people use up to $10,000 $1,000 of their points to pay their tuition,
Wow.
then that frees up those funds to help them pay for more of the living expenses that are often forgotten about. It's the monthlies that sometimes students say, oh my goodness, I can't pay my rent once I move out of res. Those are the things they have a challenge paying for, that we love hearing stories about helping them pay for those.
Well, that's great. And certainly we've talked on prior podcast episodes about the true cost of going to school and to post-secondary education, and how if the student and their parents or guardians aren't well informed, there may be this expectation or this interpretation that the student didn't budget well. Well, if you didn't start with all of the expenses in the first place, you didn't have a fulsome budget, and so you weren't planning for all of the things you were going to need to pay for. So you were always going to be short on cash, but maybe you didn't understand that, or everybody involved didn't understand that.
Sure, because things in residence, things are taken care of, like your cleaning supplies for the most part, and you're walking to your classes. Students are always surprised at how much food and transportation costs them in their second and higher years.
Absolutely. And when you and I were speaking before, it was great to hear that Centennial College was your first college on board. That's where I teach part-time in the business school in financial services. So great. And I've certainly been letting my students know about the fact that they can be using their guardian or family's loyalty points to help them pay for costs.
Right, and it's actually really great, too, because it takes a bit of pressure off the financial aid departments on campuses. A lot of international students also may be flying Air Canada using Aeroplan miles, or when they get to Canada having, their parents have one of the cards. So we have TD Rewards and CIBC Aventura, and a lot of times international students can't work in that first year, so this can help them pay for some of those fees as well.
Well, that's fantastic. So when you think of all this success that you've achieved to date, what would you say have been the top 3 success factors for you?
Success in launching the business, it was just the fact that I had worked in every industry involved and figured out how to structure HigherEdPoints so that it was a win for the loyalty programs, because they can attract more customers to use their products to collect the points. And a win for the colleges and universities. I made sure that there was no cost for the universities and colleges to participate, because that would have taken longer to get approved. And there's no cost either. There's no administration fee for the points people. But in terms of getting it set up, I think it was the fact that I had so much business experience and such a broad network of contacts to call upon, that whenever I got to the point where I needed some assistance with, say, how to manage the student loan programs, there was somebody in my network that had worked in the student loan programs. In fact, OSAP, Noah Morris, is one of the senior people at OSAP, and he really helped us figure out the best and most efficient way to get the funds into the OSAP programs. And then just because I feel so strongly about people having access to education, whenever times got tough or it seemed like it was too difficult to carry on, I got a letter from a student at one point who had 2 children, and she had recently been divorced, and her parents didn't have any money, and the program actually helped her complete her she was working on 2 degrees, helped her complete those. So just knowing that there are real people out there that we're helping, I think has helped me stay the course for the last 3-4 years.
Well, that's fantastic. And certainly I can tell how strongly you feel about helping people have access to education and be able to finish. And really you keeping with it, having that persistence has really made this a reality.
I think for anybody who's starting a business, you have to love the business that you're starting, and the people that you're going to be working with are helping to carry you through the ups and downs, for sure. Absolutely.
Now, when you think about your life, has there been any big turning points or revelations from a financial perspective?
Well, it's always great to look back on what you spent your money on in hindsight. And I guess the one thing I wish I had done was start contributing to an RRSP right out of school. So right in my first job, and maximizing the contributions to my RRSP, and also putting aside funds for rainy days. I started my career in sales, and I had a fabulous boss. She was wonderful, and she helped me learn how to cold call and how to close sales and do everything, but it was commission-based. And she taught me that you don't spend what you earn, you actually earn what you spend, meaning meaning if you went out and you had a big shopping spree for clothes, you just go and make some more sales and then make up that money on commission. And it was great for the first 3 years of my career because I could absolutely manage my bills by just going and working a little bit harder and selling a few more things. But then moving into a management role where you had a base salary and bonus maybe once a year, it was a little tough to keep that up in the long term. So I guess I wish I had been more conscious of putting money away during those flush years, because once you have kids and all of those demands, as you get older, you're not going to have as much spare cash flow to put aside for things for a rainy day, et cetera.
Absolutely. And we've talked about it on the podcast many times around the beauty of compound interest and the fact that if you put even a small amount away earlier in life, it tends to grow into a larger amount. So you don't actually have to put away as much over time. So you've just really reinforced that. And certainly anybody who's listening is going to be able to take that lesson away with them. And so they won't have to learn in the same way that you did.
Yeah.
Hello, Young Money listeners. You know that I love to talk about cash flow on the show. This episode of Young Money, featuring a fantastic entrepreneur, is sponsored by the masterclass, Can I Afford It? How to be certain of what you can and can't afford in your business in 5 minutes or less every time. This training has been specifically designed for entrepreneurs with sales in the 6 to 7 figure range to provide the 5 steps to cash flow clarity. If you are an entrepreneur with sales at these levels and want to make powerful money decisions, you do not want to miss this important masterclass. Head over to visitfinancialfitness.com/afford to register now. Stop asking yourself the question, can I afford it? So moving on, if you could tell us a little bit more in terms of how HigherEdPoints works and kind of the mechanics of it.
Sure. So if you visit the HigherEdPoints.com website, there's a tab at the top that says how it works. And essentially, HigherEdPoints is a reward item in the loyalty program's reward catalog. So we always say to parents when we meet them, no more trips and toasters for you with your loyalty points. Use them to pay for your tuition. So instead of redeeming for an electronic product or for a flight someplace, you'd redeem for the HigherEdPoints reward. And within the Aeroplan catalog and the TD Rewards catalog, once you've redeemed for, we have one redemption amount. It's $250, and there's no limit to how many individual redemptions someone can make. Once you have redeemed, there's a confirmation code, like an iTunes card, a confirmation number associated with that redemption, and either the parent, the grandparent, the employer, or the student can bring that information to an account that they set up with HigherEdPoints. And so our accounts are free to set up. And once that account is set up, they say, I want to transfer funds to an institution. The person would click on either Aeroplan or TD or CIBC or a gift certificate, and the instructions, they just follow the instructions. So then they put in the information about their Aeroplan redemption, which is their Aeroplan number and the code associated with that redemption. And then they put in the student's information, and they select the school or the loan program or the other institution they want the funds to be sent to, along with whatever student ID is appropriate, so a loan account number or the student number at the institution. They click submit, and then HigherEdPoints actually transfers those funds directly into that student's account on their behalf.
Great. Well, it sounds like it's very straightforward with fulsome details for everybody to be able to process all of that easily. Mm-hmm. In terms of what they can pay for with these this redemption with these points, what are the types of costs they can cover?
So it depends on the institution. If the school's main account covers their tuition and their residence fees and their meal plans, and at some schools you can actually use it to pay for books. So at SATE, it goes on to the student's e-card, and they can use it for any campus expense. Most schools, at the very least, you can pay for tuition. And then we've had parents of students at Western who had their tuition paid off, and what they did was they put it onto a meal plan. So the student would have, I think it was about $5,000 of funding for the school year to use for their meal plan. So when they went onto a campus restaurant, they could use their student card to pay for that. Some schools have also put put the residence fees onto the program as well. Mm-hmm. And each school has a different rule about what happens to funds when a student has overpaid. So in some cases, again, I'll use Western as an example. There was a student who'd paid all of their tuition, and they had a credit balance. And what Western does is give those funds to the student as a refund check as well. So sometimes, there are schools where if you've overpaid, we can't send the funds to the student directly, but a lot of the schools will give that refund to the student, recognizing that they've got rent or other things they need to pay for.
Okay. Well, that's fantastic. And on your website, I expect that people can find out exactly what schools are included. You mentioned that there's over 100 in Canada.
Yep, there are. So pretty much all of the big schools, University of Toronto, Western, Ryerson, York, etc., are included, but there's a participating institutions page specifically dedicated.
Excellent. And how can students learn more about the program?
They can visit HigherEdPoints.com, and all of the information that they would need is at our website, and they'll also find out about it. A lot of the schools have us listed in their How to Pay pages. Oh,
that's fantastic. And certainly it may be some cases where students are educating their parents or their loved ones to help them learn about this. Is there anything that specifically targets the parents around this when they're redeeming things on their loyalty cards?
Yep. So TD actually has us listed in a drop-down menu, in TD Rewards. It's redeemed for education. And then Aeroplan as well, you can find us under the activities and merchandise category. So, and sometimes they'll advertise it directly to the parents. On our website, we actually have an email, or you can share on social media about the program.
Well, that's fantastic.
Get more points, that email that they can send out to people in their social circles, or they can post it on social media.
Excellent. And you and I had met about a month ago. You were awarded to be one of the top 7 Canadian 2017 SheEO Funded Ventures. And so congratulations again.
Thank you. It's an amazing group, and I can't believe the incredible women that I've met, including yourself, through the SheEO Ventures.
Oh, thank you. And so for those who aren't familiar with SheEO, it's essentially a program whereby female activators invest their funds into a pool of funds, and then the women investors get to select out of all of the nominated ventures who actually gets the money, and then the ventures themselves actually split up the funds. So when I had seen HigherEdPoints as one of the participating ventures, certainly was one I voted for. It was a very novel concept and something I thought that would really help a lot of people, and it would be great for more people to get exposure to it. So I think it can help people realize their dream of getting that education in place for themselves.
Well, thank you. And there was an article I saw about student debt preventing people from moving into the next phase of their lives, buying homes, getting married, et cetera. So if we can help students actually pay for their education while they're at school and then help them repay that debt faster, then it's great not only for the individuals but for the economy overall as well.
Oh, absolutely. And certainly we don't want all students to be kind of burdened or carried under by all of this student debt. So anything that can help. This is another great tool. Some people may not have cash on hand, but they may have a lot of points. So certainly will be of great value to many students. Mm-hmm. I wanted to touch upon something you raised a little bit earlier in our conversation about the middle 60. And so I had read an article that you had on your site about it, and I think it'd be great if you could tell the listeners a little bit more about the middle 60. It's something I hadn't consciously thought about, but once I read it, I thought, of course, it makes total sense, but I'm not sure it's top of mind for everybody.
Sure. So I coined the phrase middle 60 when I was at the scholarship matching service, because I sat beside a woman it was a student event of some sort, and she said, there's lots of money out there for the students that have really high marks, and there's lots of money out there for the students whose parents don't make enough money. And in Ontario, I think it's wonderful that the Ontario government has created more OSAP funds available for mature students and for people from low-income families. But the challenge is once you get out of that threshold, especially if your family income is over, I think the maximum threshold is $160,000 of family income, there's no OSAP funding available for those students. And so they have to find the funds from either bank loans, lines of credit, working while at school. A lot of students that I met were working full-time hours while trying to go to school full-time. And the challenge is they can't focus on their studies. They can't get the marks that they need to get into the other programs they want to. So this middle 60% of students are often left without the sources of funds that are available to the Uber students and to those that can access the government funding. And the challenge is those are the students now that are coming out with the most debt when they graduate. And that's impacting the jobs that they can accept and where they can live. I've met students that had to move back home, far away from Toronto because the minimum monthly payment on the loans that they had taken out from banks and otherwise was too much for them to afford to live in the city and to accept jobs. And the challenge, I think, is that a lot of employers, when they're putting a scholarship into place in the market, they want the money to go to what we call the Uber students. But there's tons and tons of money out there already for those Uber students. If they were to actually take the funds that they were going to allocate to a scholarship and give it to 5 or 6 universities or colleges and give it to the financial aid office to use for emergency funds or even work-study programs, because there's lots of students that would like to work while they're at school, but the work-study funding generally also goes to those students that are on financial assistance. And it's an easier way of identifying the students to give the work-study opportunities to. But I think if employers started taking a look at creating scholarships and awards that were for that middle 60, the average student, the student that's going to buy your product, the student that's going to come and work at your company, you'd be helping a lot more people than are currently being provided with the assistance that they need.
And when you say Uber students, I take it you mean strong grades, strong extracurricular activities, pretty much doing and excelling in all things.
Right, yeah. So a lot of scholarships, the vanilla criteria will be high marks, lots of community service awards, and often going into the STEM fields, so the science, technology, engineering, and math fields, whereas I think a lot of employers are finding that they really like hiring students who come from the arts and humanities because they're better critical thinkers and they're often better communicators, but there aren't a lot of scholarships and awards out there for people taking general arts programs.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that, Suzanne. Now, when you think about financial matters, is there anybody out there, whether celebrity or someone in your family, who inspires you when it comes to financial matters?
I think my financial hero is probably my husband. We've been married for over 20 years, and he was appalled at my earn what you spend mentality when we first started dating. He's much more fiscally responsible, and he too is and has always been on commission, and so he understands that there are ebbs and flows in everything. And he taught me, never ever carry a balance on your credit cards. Make sure that you're only spending money that you've got coming in so you can pay it off. And that financial responsibility now is being translated to our kids. I've got a daughter in first year at university, and she's very aware of the inflows and the outflows, and is trying to, work on the inflow side by having a job. And she recognizes that once she's off campus and she doesn't have the meal plan, that she's going to have to be a lot more disciplined with budgeting. And so we're trying together to create that in our kids as well. It's not easy at all. It's a continuous communication on the inflows and outflows.
Absolutely. And as I always talk about with financial fitness, it's really a positive point of view. You can be stepping off the couch, just like in physical fitness, taking your first walk around the block. You can be starting to learn about budgeting, starting to learn about the way cash flow works, or you can be really sophisticated. So you could be training physically for a marathon, or actually training to be a more sophisticated investor and do a lot more investments. So it's moving along that continuum and continuing to increase your financial acumen as you go.
Right. Yep. And a lot of it.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just say a lot of it has to come from parents, because it's really challenging for educators to incorporate it into the curriculum, even though I know in Ontario we're trying to get more of it into the curriculum, and there's lots of stuff, but really it comes from, witnessing the behaviors at home and talking about it and not making it a scary subject.
Absolutely. And I have to admit, I too was cringing when you were talking about earning what you spend. Because that flies in the face of my childhood and my upbringing. But certainly what happens in your household stays with you. I once had a 5-year-old tell me that money was evil.
Oh.
Only imagine what's going on in her household because she's learned at 5 years old that money is a really bad thing. And so that doesn't just come. There's been some situations that have occurred that have led her to that kind of thought process.
Right, and it's a huge source of stress. In every area of life, it can be a huge source of stress, and it doesn't have to be. It's just a matter of learning how to earn it and how to preserve it, and ensure that it's not being wasted.
Absolutely. So, what are you working on now, Suzanne?
Well, the next big step for HigherEdPoints, we are very close to bringing on the federal student loan program, which means that over 1 million graduates who will take 8 to 10 years to repay their student loans will have access to HigherEdPoints. And we would love to add the U.S. to our program. So for students that are traveling to the U.S. to study, being able to use the Canadian program to fund their education in the U.S., and then also to expand to the U.S. so that U.S. students can access loyalty programs they've collected in the U.S.
Oh, that's really exciting. A lot of great things you've got on the horizon.
Thank you.
And finally, before I let you go, please tell our listeners where they can go to learn more about you and HigherEdPoints.
So you can visit HigherEdPoints.com, and all of the information on how to use the program is there. And we also, in our blog section, have information on how to save money on repaying your loans, and access to other sources of funds as well, such as the scholarship matching service. ScholarshipsCanada.com is a great resource as well. And then on the, if you just Google student loans in Canada, there are also resources that the government provides on different sources of funding as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us, Suzanne. I know
Thank you, Tracy.
You're welcome. And I've really enjoyed our chat today. I think it's really great how you shared with us your success factors, being that business experience, having those contacts, and through the stories that you shared with us, really that persistence to stick with it because you have felt so strongly about the people that you're giving access to education to through this program, which I think is fantastic. Also love the lessons you shared with us about things you wish you'd known earlier, about contributing earlier to an RSP or saving for that rainy day fund, emergency fund, and highlighting your husband as your financial inspiration and someone who's been a strong guiding force in your relationship and really been helping with teaching those lessons and passing them on to your children. So it's fantastic.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I appreciate the opportunity to chat about it, and I love what you're doing as well to help demystify financial wellness, which is also a great term, financial fitness.
Thank you, Suzanne. So there you have it, listeners. Suzanne Tyson of HigherEdPoints. Please check out the website. Certainly you may be able to pay for some of your expenses or pay for some of your student loan repayment using loyalty points that you or someone in your family may have. Take good care and stay financially fit.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. To all you millionaires in the making out there, if you love this podcast, please subscribe on iTunes to keep your financial fitness training going. Oh, and leave us a review. And be sure to visit 2 S's, 2 T's, financialfitness.com to take your free financial fitness assessment. Find out how financially fit you really are. See you next week, young millionaires to be.